So welcome to this Succeed with Dyslexia webinar, and the title of today's talk is Addressing Literacy Poverty, a Moral Obligation. And I'm really happy to introduce Katy Parkinson. Hi, Katy.
Hi, good to be here. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, Katy is the founder and director of Lexonik, and she's an outspoken advocate for literacy support for people of all ages and stages. And recently she's called upon the UK Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson MP, in an appeal to support teachers to be better supported to nurture children's reading as part of the curriculum, making that the focus rather than making these new demands for heavy targets that have to be met. It's about putting literacy right at the heart and establishing the importance of that. So can we define, Katy, what we mean by literacy poverty to start?
It's quite a big one, that one, really. But for me, if I can actually turn it on its head and talk about what literacy is, and I will always use Kofi Annan's quote, and if you pardon me for reading it so I get it explicit, because he said that literacy is a bridge from misery to hope, and it's a tool for the daily life in modern society. It's the bulwark against poverty, and literacy is a basic human right. If we can't educate our young children to become literate, they are going to be trapped in this poverty trap, if you like, because of their lack of skill in literacy. And we need to allow them to escape that poverty, if you like. I think it's almost like a hindrance to social mobility, if not even prevents you from that social mobility. Because without reading, you, as I say, you can't escape the space you are born into, basically. So that's basically what it is. It traps you within a certain social strata, if you like, and it's very, very difficult without literacy to step outside that. So we do need to address it. I think it is for me, the answer to that question is it's a resounding yes. It is a moral responsibility that we teach everybody to read.
A bridge from misery to hope.
Hope, yeah. Lots of hard work for the individual, lots of hard work for the teacher, but it can be done. We can educate every single person in the UK and the world to read English, but sometimes it needs a little bit more effort from both schools, teachers, government, as well as the child. Everybody needs to be pulling in the same direction, and that's why I was really happy to be asked to speak with you today, because I think we share the same passion. It is that moral right. We do have that moral right to make sure that we do not fail our children and our young people and our adults.
My experience came from being ill-equipped when I was a teacher to support children with dyslexia. I wasn't trained when I did my teacher training, a long time ago now. I didn't have that training given to me, and I didn't have the understanding of dyslexia. And it became a passion for me to be better equipped to support children to read, because I recognised that I failed them by not having the skills that I needed at the point where I needed to support those children. And I think about them still, they're probably in their 30s now. And I wonder whether they have had the support that they needed that I didn't give them at that point in time. So for me, my journey became about changing that round. It upset me so much that I didn't support those children that I went on training courses and did that. But there are so many teachers who just don't have the level of understanding that they need to support. And I think the moral obligation is also around how we train teachers, how we support from the outset. It seems we need a bit of a revolution in the way that we're going about supporting teacher training.
Definitely, because I was secondary trained, and it was home economics I was trained in, and I loved the subject. I absolutely loved the subject. And then we moved area, and also the government were sort of changing the curriculum, and it was making it more academic. So I could no longer teach child development or food as I saw it. It got too academic. And many of my kids were leaving school possibly at the end of that year and becoming parents the following year, and thought child development really, really important. So I changed tack a little bit and went into a school for emotional and behavioural difficult children. And I was appalled at how many of those children, not all, but how many of those children were non-readers. or at least found reading challenging. So that started me saying, what on earth is going on here? This school is full of children who are failing. They were now secondary age children, failing to read. And of course, that's the start of the pipeline from schools to prisons, because the facts are out there for yourself if you read documentation about the number of, or the percentage of inmates in prisons. So it was working in an EBD school and realising these children, what came first? Was it the lack of reading ability, or was it their behaviour? And I would suggest for a lot of them, it was the reading started to fail, and therefore the behaviour went off.
And for many teachers, they then see behaviour and they don't see literacy as the difficulty.
Absolutely. And if you're talking about secondary age children, not many teaching training will teach secondary teachers how to teach the basic reading. English teachers are marvellous. English teachers do a marvellous job, and boy, do they enjoy their subject. And yes, they do encourage reading. But when you've got somebody who's actually struggling, I think you do need that expertise to say, well, why are they struggling? What extra do they need, or what something different do they need? Because they've obviously been failing so far. They're now in secondary school, and yet they are struggling with literacy, and they shouldn't be. They really shouldn't be.
So this literacy pipeline, the prison pipeline that we were just talking about, I've been looking at the statistics for this. 50% of the prison population, and possibly 60%, have difficulty with literacy. There is a huge number there of people who have had dyslexia, perhaps not diagnosed, not supported. I think within that bracket, there is complete illiteracy at about 20%, and functional levels of literacy just above that. It is a huge problem, and it should be no surprise to us, really, that literacy creates life chances deficit for people. So let's talk a little bit about that. The challenge of illiteracy in society and the impact of it, and the life chances for individuals. Prison pipeline, but what's the other impact for people who perhaps don't end up going through the prison line? What's the opportunities for them?
Well, they tend to be employed in lower paid jobs. Therefore, you've got poverty, financial poverty within the home as well, which that in itself brings up changes. But also there's the health issue, because I'm not earning a great deal. It's very difficult to buy the quality food and actually, feed yourself well, so your health deteriorates. If I can't read, I may find it very difficult to apply for or fill in forms medically wise, so I just stay quiet about things. So it really affects the poverty, the health, and life expectations. If you look at the statistics for people dying in poverty, it is far greater than somebody who is actually earning more. So it impacts completely in those things. So you've got your education, you've got your health, you've got living in poverty, and the frustration that must cause. It's untold the impact that would have in those areas, and it scares me, because every one of us could be caught in that if we weren't able to read. Every one of us. So and also this, I mentioned the social mobility before, is breaking into it can actually cause loneliness, because breaking into a new friendship group, if everybody else is able to read and share stories about a marvellous book they've been reading, or even something on the news, and you're starting to use vocabulary that I don't understand, I feel cut off from society now. I can't make friends within that friendship group. Not because I'm unfriendly and the group's unfriendly, but I just feel inadequate about joining in a conversation at the level that they are actually using. And that would be no fault of mine. Vocabulary for me is a big thing as well, because if you're not reading, you're not exposing yourself to a high quality of vocabulary. You would only keep within conversational language. So therefore you begin to almost believe that you are not as intelligent, and you shouldn't feel that way. You should not feel that way. And of course, if you're an adult, the stigma is really, really hard as well, because I've heard, working with some adults, they're quite happy to say that, I'm not very good at maths, or I'm not very good at spelling. But I've never found somebody who says I'm not very good at reading, because it really seems to have this social stigma that, what, she can't read, she can't be very clever then, and that really, really riles me. You could, think of some of the very famous dyslexic people who are very, very brilliant, very rich business people, but they still struggle to read, but they had opportunities elsewhere that allowed them to, get to where they arrived at.
So if you are in a job and you are looking for promotion, you are probably going to have to take a test that is going to involve reading.
Yes.
And it might be a job that you're really great at. It might be within the fire service or something practical, where within your daily work, maybe you don't need to do a huge amount of reading, or within the prison service where your communication skills as a prison officer are really highly valued. But actually, your ceiling for how far you can go within your career is limited by your ability to read, because to get promotion you have to go through these hurdles of doing tests and taking tests.
Absolutely. And
when you become an adult, you don't want to say to your peers, your colleagues, or the people who are teaching you, I am really struggling reading. It's now become a huge issue, this conversation around a need for reading support.
Yeah, and I would ask employers to, really look at that, because if I'm employed in, say, a computer industry or whatever, but I may be very, very good at designing programs, but I'm hopeless at writing copy. But if that's not the job I'm going for, right, I'm very good at building sites, right, okay, give me that job, regardless that I can't write copy, get somebody else to write the copy for you. So you've got to be, I think employers have got to be realistic. What skills do you want your employees to have? And it may not involve, as you said, it may not be involved in reading. But we have had some, I'm thinking again, men in particular who have come to us who have been successful in getting promotion, but are starting to panic because I've now got to write reports and I don't know how to write reports. I don't know how to read reports. I don't understand some of the terminology. And they have gone through Lexonik, and we've supported them in that, because they obviously were good enough to get promotion, but then once they were promoted, they themselves started to feel vulnerable. I can't keep up with this. And they should be able to access interventions even in adulthood. It's you're never too old to read, or never too old to learn to read. You can learn that skill at any time, but you just need effective interventions.
So let's talk a little bit more about Lexonik, because you've mentioned it there and how that's supported adult learners. But just tell us a little bit more about Lexonik and we'll dive in. Okay,
so Lexonik was developed, if you like, or the seed of Lexonik started when I was working in an education authority in the northeast of England, and I was dyslexic trained, and I had a team of dyslexic trained teachers supporting local schools, and I deployed myself into the schools as well, and it was using resources for these dyslexic children, and I thought, I'm not closing any gap here. I think they enjoyed my sessions, but I genuinely didn't seem to be able to move them on quick enough, because the catch-up had to happen, because the curriculum doesn't wait, right? So I have to get these kids up to speed as quick as I possibly could, and the resources I had at the time weren't doing it. So that was the seed. And I think what I quickly discovered was it was the pace often of the lessons. So Lexonik was born through frustration that I didn't have the resources, and my realization that just to be able to recall letter sounds, or just to be able to be, almost read that word, pace is important. So with Lexonik, oh my goodness, pace is, we time everything. You've got to get quicker and quicker and quicker. And sometimes school leaders in particular question the fact about this pace, because you don't understand my children, Kate, in my school. They can't deal with pace, and I've got a lot of dyslexic children, and they cannot, because they've got the processing skills, they cannot work at pace. And my answer to them is, on day one, I will accept whatever pace they're at. But by day two, I expect them to have picked up a little bit of pace. And then by day three, a little bit more. So it's having high expectations, putting in the support and really pushing them. Children, like an adult, like to be pushed if they are being pushed with the right support. Because by pushing, you see success. As soon as someone sees success, that is the best motivator you can possibly give them. And when I was a brand new company, trying to break into the education market, I would ask head teachers to invite me into your school. You supply the 4 children. You know where they're coming from. You give me 4 children, and I promise you, you will see a difference in 1 hour. And nobody ever called me a liar, but I did see eyes roll as if total disbelief. But at the end of those hours, the head teachers and the senior leaders who were watching me deliver 1 hour session, they said, oh my goodness, I saw them grow within 1 hour. But that's because I had high expectations of them, whether they are dyslexic, ADHD. You tell me, give me a label. They do succeed with pace at the appropriate pace for them, but just always expect them to get better and better and quicker, and they do, and they love it. So it's pace for me is very, very important.
And I imagine that embedding and making sure that something is well understood is part of that development of pace. Is that how the strategy works?
Yes, because although I'm saying pace, it's got to be quick, but then we'll go back and revisit it. And then we'll quick, and then go back and revisit it. There was a government document years and years ago. It was actually on the same piece of paper. One said the pace of lesson was too slow, and then the other page it was that the pace of lesson is too quick. And what when I teased it out, it was actually, it's good to have that pace within the lesson, but then don't keep moving on. You've got to have that retrieval practice. You've got to have that gap learning so that, I taught you this last week. I'll revisit it again. You may have remembered it all. You may not have remembered any of it, but we will keep on going and going. And I love a quote. I don't know who it's from. It's, I think it's Miss Anonymous. But don't practice until you get it right. Practice until you can't get it wrong. And that's what Lexonik's all about. You keep on doing it until it's so automatic. So pace allows for that automaticity, so that when you are into the program, you no longer have to think what letter sound that is, or you no longer have to think what that syllable is. You can scan that, polysyllabic word and just boom, 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 read it. But its pace allows you to do that. If we don't build in the pace, you become too, reading is too cumbersome. It takes you far too long to read that word. It takes you far too long to read that sentence. And therefore, when I ask you a comprehension question, it's like, I've given up. I've got no memory space left to do that. So pace, automaticity, and the tuition has got to be so explicit. And don't be afraid to go back and do it again and do it again. And what I love about our sessions, they're always in small groups, the students. We like 4. I think 4 is the optimum number to actually move children forward. And the amount of self-teaching or peer teaching, as we say, happens then. Because it may be that one pupil gets it, and the conversations that we have with that one pupil allows the other 2 people to sort of sit back, more relaxed, listen to that conversation of instruction. And all of a sudden, you can see the penny drop. You can see, got it now, simply by sitting, listening to me talk to another pupil, giving them not time off, but just out of the limelight, if you like, a little bit, to pick up the instruction that I've been giving this other student. And to me, working in groups of 4 is phenomenal. And I love it when I can just sit back and let them teach each other. That's brilliant. When you get to that stage, that's brilliant.
That's the gold standard for every teacher. It's bottling the penny drop moment.
It's the light bulb, the penny. It's amazing and so powerful.
So let's talk about COVID catch up. Just because we've got so many children who spent time out of school over the last couple of years, and the challenge of what we've got happening now is. It's such a high level of challenge for teachers. I think the government data is telling us that children are going to be coming back to schools with a minimum of 2 months reading age gap. That's what they calculated in January 2020. That was from an interim report. And I sat back and I looked at that report and I thought, I think that's going to be 6 months by the time we get to September and we start the new academic term, or when children transition from primary to secondary schooling. I just envisaged this terrific gap. So are the catch-up programmes going to be fit for purpose, and how has COVID had an impact on literacy and students in education?
I don't think we can really truly answer that question until we've actually got September and possibly a term, seeing who those children are. But I think it's going to be, for many children, I think the gap's going to be even bigger. Yeah. But so I can't answer that question until we've actually got there. But I think what we need to make sure is that our interventions are in place, and that involves a lot of extra training for teachers. because I think it's the changing in phases that we're going to find, from primary into secondary. And as I mentioned before, many of our secondary colleagues haven't had that experience or haven't had that training to actually implement. So programmes at the schools and senior leaders need to be very, very sure that they are, or of the efficacy of those programmes. Because I'm a little bit scared that a lot of money will be spent and the impact won't be there. I don't want to be doom and gloom, because we have got some marvellous teachers, we've got some marvellous TAs, but I think the number of children that then require that support is going to overwhelm them. And my fear is that, I mentioned before this 1 to 4, and I'm an advocate for 1 to 4. I've tried delivering my programme in 1 to 6, and you don't get the same uplift. But because of constraints, financial and staffing, I think there's a danger of the interventions being delivered in too big a group, and therefore you are seen to do something, but actually the impact. So we need to make sure we've got measures in place. Whatever intervention the schools have employed, what is the impact? Has it actually worked? And also, just while I mentioned about the catch-up, I really don't like the term catch-up, and I know that lots of other people don't like that, because it infers or implies to the child that there's something wrong now and you've got to catch up. And I've been trying to think, well, what other words, because we mean that, we do mean to catch up. But, are you ready to accelerate? That's exciting. And sometimes it's just the change in terminology. So I think we're in, I think we're in for a big challenge. I think teachers are in for a big challenge, simply because of the numbers of children that may be requiring support. And listening to the television this morning and yesterday, actually, it's the lower income families, it's the disadvantaged families, it's the children looked after. Those are the children that have always had more challenges in gaining literacy, and those are the ones that have actually suffered even more over the COVID. Let's try and support our schools, support our teachers, get the teachers trained, but allow the teachers teachers assisting, to have the time and to allow them to have smaller groups. And some school advisors advised me to say, okay, why don't you take groups of 8, Katy, but work with them for longer? Because we only work for children with groups of 4 for 6 weeks. So they were suggesting, timetabling-wise, I'll give you groups of 8 pupils, but you can have them for twice as long. I thought, it won't work. And I've tried it and it doesn't work, because I cannot motor those 8 children to the pace that they have to be able to catch up. And that's my big fear, is that yes, they've spent money, they've brought in an intervention, but then they start to have too large a class to allow that professional teacher in front of them to actually make progress. So I hope they are fit for purpose. I hope they're allowed to be fit for purpose. The jury's out in that one, I think.
As someone who's in the Senko organising the interventions, I know exactly what the pressures are. You've got the pressures of numbers. So you get your year 7 intake information, you look at the reading age scores, and then you look at the list and you think, right, these are my students who immediately need support. And so you find an intervention to support them, hopefully the right one for those children. And then you have a huge tranche of children who are not going to be able to access reading at the reading age level that is expected of them when they go into secondary school. And you scramble to try and provide support. And it was one of my great frustrations as a Senko, was that I never felt I was given the resources, the finance, the support and direction as well to find the right interventions. It is crucial that we discuss this and that teachers and Senkos are aware that getting this right now will have a lifetime impact on the children who engage in those interventions.
And something else that impacts on just exactly what you said, your time and capacity as Senkos and special needs teachers within schools. you have got to target the ones the most needy. I appreciate that, but by doing that, you're missing out a massive cohort of students with a little bit of extra push could actually change, the D grade to a C grade, the C grade to a B grade, and even the B to an A. And when students in that band, so not particularly, not SEN, it's the middle band people that are starting to struggle with language and literacy. If they go through the Lexonik program, it really, really lifts them, because it's not baby-like, it's challenging. And what I love when some of our customer schools, through support from us, when they put the Lexonik in, they actually start with some of the higher achievers and move it down. So they work with the higher achievers. The higher achievers realise, oh my goodness, how much have I learned and how much I can continue to learn. And of course, it's far easier to have some of your lower ability children or your lower attaining children to clamber to get onto a programme, because they know that the top sets are getting it. So it's changing mind shifts and changing language is so incredibly powerful. But so, we tend to, or we suggest that you roll out Lexonik with some of your higher achievers before you actually target some of the more needy ones. And we've got various different programs anyway for some of the children who really, really are struggling at the basic rung.
I imagine you've had some increasing demand at Lexonik for services and support.
It has been one crazy time for everybody in the last couple of years. But yes, we, to have your customer base that is like shut the shops within, 2 weeks of COVID starting. And then because we were face-to-face company, we had to very quickly adapt our product, which was scary, changing it so that it could become online. So that took us a while. Once we got that, we had some data to make sure that just because we're online, my fear was, well, will it be as impactful for the students if it's online? And the data we've got back, yes, it is. So now we've got that, we've got our programme, converted to be either online or still face-to-face, and we've got the data to back it up. Yes, we are now starting to see an upturn, which is great, because the need is going up as well. And we have been able to, convert our face-to-face delivery to online if that's required. So that has helped us tremendously. And, the developments that we've had with developing vocabulary, because to me, going back years ago when I was developing the programme, all I thought I needed to do was to get secondary age children at that time, just get them to decode the word, that'll be fine, because in the classroom, the teachers will be teaching vocabulary. And then it came as a sudden realisation, actually, the methods that were being used to teach vocabulary possibly weren't as effective as they should be. And I was one of that clan when I was a mainstream teacher. I would provide definitions to words. I would have walls that were brilliant, words and definitions and displays, and we would talk about, or I would go and look that word up in the dictionary, and I would give you words in your planner. And at the end of the year, it made no difference to my students. So the next part of development was, how do you quickly upskill vocabulary? Because decoding on its own is useless. And that's why I think I like to call it a modern fun version of Latin. If you don't know the meanings of prefixes, suffixes and stems, you cannot bridge that vocabulary gap. You cannot. And, the hard work that every teacher goes into, because again, this is not a new thing, teach your vocabulary. Of course I teach your vocabulary, but how are you teaching it? And I can remember having a conversation with a principal of a school who was maths. He was a maths teacher. And, I was saying, what's the definition of perpendicular? So he gave me a pristine definition. And I thought, do your kids get parallel and perpendicular mixed up? And I thought, all the time. Okay, something's gone wrong then. I said, do you know what pend means? No. A pendant will fall down. A pendulum will hang down. Something suspended will hang down. The perpendicular line then hangs down and creates that 90-degree angle. And it's like, oh my goodness. So independence, I am not hanging on the need of someone. Dependence, I am hanging down on the need of something. So using that one stem, you can then see how you can open up someone's vocabulary. And that's what I'm saying about vocabulary instruction. Giving definitions, that's what I used to do. And I couldn't understand why my kids at the end of the year didn't understand the words. I've been telling them what they meant for that year, telling them what it means. Doesn't work. You've got to motivate them. You've got a lovely quote from a kid was, "I feel like Inspector Clouseau," and another one was, "I didn't know words gave you clues." So if you're trying to learn individual words every time you come across one and don't see the links for yourself, that method is going to fail you. You've got to know how to, I don't know what that word means. I'm going to have to unpick it using this modern fun version of Latin and work it out for myself. And that's what I love. I love the decoding, and I get so passionate with the vocabulary. It's often forgotten about.
It brings joy, doesn't it? Because once you've cracked the code, the doors are open.
Yes.
And that sounds like exactly what you're doing through Lexonik, which is very exciting. Yeah. And when children have that penny drop, that light bulb moment, when they realise they can take a piece of learning and they can apply it and apply it and apply it, boom, and you know that's success.
Yeah, a wonderful student, Matthew, year 11. And I wrongly, because again, I don't think about, you should never underestimate, you should never put a level on someone's, but I believed he was the weaker of the 4 children I was working with, or students I was working with. And one of the words we decoded was octogenarian, and did they know what it meant? No, they weren't quite sure. So we looked at the oct and the genarian, and oh yeah, so it's somebody in their 80s, fantastic. And then one of the people said, well, what's somebody in the 90s then, miss? And before I had time to ask, Matthew, who I had labelled the lower achieving student, said, it must be an nonagenarian. And I got that from maths. I thought, yes, that's where it's come from. And you have worked it out for yourself. And that's what we need to do. Giving a programme that will only last as long as I'm delivering it would fail. You've got to deliver something that they then understand and then can continue to apply. And that's how you can have that accelerated increase in reading and in understanding, because without the decoding, without the word knowledge, asking you to comprehend a passage is beyond you. You've got to have the decoding and the understanding of language. Background information helps as well, of course, but for some of our students, they don't have that. But if they're the reading, they can start to read around the background. Decode for reading and decode for meaning, and then you can comprehend, in my opinion.
Let's talk a little bit about older learners, our vulnerable adults, because it's important, it's crucial that we support our disadvantaged learners where we can see that they need so much support. I was going to say the gap then, but I'm not going to. This is the acceleration opportunity, but also we know that we need to be supporting the most vulnerable people in our society too. So I believe Lexonik's been working in the prison space, is that right?
Yes, we have, and we would like to be working in far more prisons, but breaking into prison I have found to be extremely challenging and difficult. But we are having wonderful conversations now because the need is there, and the need has been known for years and years and years. And again, wonderful trained people in the prisons have been using certain programs, but has there been an impact? Because I read a couple of weeks ago, £18 billion is the cost of reoffending. And again, they gave you a percentage of the reoffending was because they couldn't get jobs once they're out. So that's why, the Accelerated Prison Project hopefully will make a difference, because they're going to focus on education, then accommodation and employment, and also health. So those 3, if we can crack those 3, the reoffending rate hopefully will go down. But 18 billion. So yes, I thoroughly enjoy getting into the prisons, and the joy to see men, because we want to, how we want to run it out is to train men in there, serving their sentence for whatever reason, and training them to deliver to other men within the prison. And the feedback I've gotten from one particular man was, I can't tell you, Katie, the feeling I have inside now, because I know I'm helping somebody. People go to prison and have a sentence because they've committed a crime, but their punishment is to go to prison. We shouldn't continue punishing them. We need to train them. If the need is lack of education, or at least lack of literacy skill, we need to put that right, because that wrongdoing was done by us. So rather than punish them again and not give them really, really explicit and really effective teaching, we're punishing them again. So let's say, sorry, we should have made sure you were, functional and literate. It may have stopped you going into prison. So yeah, we've been working in our London prison, and also prison up here in the northeast. I've actually also had the delight of going across to Florida and teaching in a jail over in Florida. And again, it was the comments from the men. I'll be able to teach my kids to read when I go back, and so let's make use of their sentence time. Let's get them really reading. And this has always been a problem in prisons, and we've always tried to do something about it. But I think getting lots of passionate people together and trying to work out a solution from them. And if I can just quote, I was actually speaking to somebody in Texas, a very successful businessman in Texas, who was educated in London, and he was became a behaviour difficult child very early on. He says now that he hates his old self because he was disruptive, he was a behaviour issue. He was then sent to a special school, and he felt very, very annoyed about that because he saw those special children not being him at all because they were autistic or physically handicapped. So I could see the disability, and I thought there's nothing wrong with me. So he more frustration, got in trouble with the police, but thankfully, what he was saying was, thankfully the judge that was about to sentence him because he had been stealing cars said, I won't send you to the prison this time, but you're going to go and learn a trade. So he did. He learned his trade, got to America, and is a very, very successful carpenter. And he now works with, and he wants to work more with dyslexic learners because it was his dyslexia that he honestly believes that is what caused all of the behaviour and the frustration. And when I was talking to him, he had to bite back the tears when he remembered the frustration. He is an intelligent man and he's got a successful business, but he says, how close was I to becoming a professional thief or a professional drug dealer or a professional something on the wrong side of the law, simply because I wasn't ready to. And it's hearing people who've genuinely gone through that journey that really spurs me on to do more, to stop the pipeline in the first place. But if you do end up in prison, let's get you out of there by trying to teach you how to read. And also, if you are in the adult sector, who are just the furthest away from employment, so you haven't gone to prison, but you've found employment very, very hard because you can't possibly apply for the jobs or fill in the forms accurately enough, and you don't get that job. And yet you might be the most brilliant person for that most brilliant person for that particular job, and yet your literacy is failing you to get that opportunity. And yeah, I could cry for lots and lots of people who just miss out because of the dyslexia, if you want to call it dyslexia, but just finding literacy challenging. And I say mainstream teachers are doing a marvellous job both in the primary sector and this primary and secondary. But it's the number of people who now will be requiring that support. And yeah, I just want to be part of helping and supporting the schools and the students and the teachers, because they need all the support they can have at the moment. They've done a wonderful job keeping the lid on things, throughout. How they've managed to, survive COVID themselves. I don't mean the virus. I mean survive COVID in school. What they have done is absolutely amazing, and hats off to them. Hats off to them. Brilliant.
Katy, thank you so much. I really feel that we have answered the question, is addressing literacy, poverty, a moral obligation?
Yes.
It absolutely is.
Yes, it is. We've got to stop it, and we've got to all work together and see passionate people like yourselves. And yeah, let's do it together, because you can do far more when you're working together. And that's, we always want to be working in partnerships with other people, whether it's other companies delivering something similar, like Scanning Pens, or working with schools, or working with teachers, with parents. We want to work in partnership, because that's what will work. It's the partnerships.
Thank you so much. I wholeheartedly agree.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching this webinar. We hope you enjoyed this content, and if you'd like to learn more about neurodiversity and supporting individuals who have dyslexia, please feel free to click this link to your right and enjoy more awesome content. We'll see you there.